Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven and I am your host. As always, we are interrupting your watching of March Madness. So hopefully your brackets are doing well. Unless you're in my group, I hope they are bad. But happy to be here tonight to talk some Joe Ortiz press conference as well as some 2024 running backs with my guy Tyler. As always, Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Doing well overall, but I'm getting killed in what's called March Mammal Madness, which is a sciencey thing that sets it up bracket style, 64 different teams. I'm getting destroyed right now. My kids are all beating me. I told them they get 5 points of extra credit if they beat me, and I guess I'm handing out a lot of extra credit this year.
Yeah. Well, hope those students are doing well. If you're not a college basketball fan, I totally get it. I only start watching college basketball after the Super Bowl. Really, I'll watch like NBA games here and there, in the winter. But college basketball does not exist to me until mid-February, especially because Utah has been bad for like the last 10 years. So it's been not a great year for the Utah Utes. But I digress here. So we're going to talk, like I mentioned, some brief takeaways from the Joe Ortiz press conference from today, or media roundtable, or I don't exactly know what was the case there today. But anyways, Joe Ortiz spoke to the media, and we'll have some takeaways there, and then we'll dive into this class of 2024 running backs. So we've been doing this in a way that we can kind of preview the whole class instead of ranking them. It's kind of our way of diving into that. So it should be a lot of fun now that the Chargers have Gus Edwards. So, Tyler, like I mentioned, Joe Ortiz's press conference, there's a lot to dive into there. Daniel Popper, Eric Smith did a great job of breaking down everything. I don't know how much we want to dive into the Big Four stuff, because this is the first time that Joe Ortiz has spoken to the media after the Big Four, but I don't really have a big takeaway there. I think the place to start for Chargers fans really is kind of his approach to free agency as a whole. Did you have any thoughts about how he was asked about like roster construction questions from today?
Yeah, it's nothing necessarily new, but it's always good to hear. And sometimes, I guess with Telesco and other GMs, like when they start to repeat themselves and reinforce certain ideas, you really start to pay attention. So with Joe Ortiz, before the Chargers even hired him, he was profiled as someone, or at least the Ravens were profiled as a team that would acquire players at any point in the season. Before the draft, after the draft, trades during the draft, before the season, at the deadline, etc. And Joe Ortiz really reiterated all of that today. And I think it's interesting because this regime has been very open about the shortcomings of the previous one, not necessarily like taking a shot, but just being honest. And it's something that was plain to see for all Chargers fans. And in particular, in this case, Telesco and the Chargers not making moves. And, he didn't say this, but fizzling out at the end of the season because,
Yeah.
all right, we'll take our guys, next man up. We're going to carry us into the postseason. And then you get to New England or you get to Denver and, we're short a few players. Oh, well, we can't move on. We'll try it again next year.
Yeah. The
The
whole
Ravens,
like Jason Moore experience was that whole thing.
right. And it was the whole Telesco tenure from 2013 when they played the playoffs all the way till the most recent season. So what Joe Ortiz said was, I know in the past here, there haven't been a lot of additions during the season with trades, but that's something I believe in. And if you have a chance to trade for a good player midseason, that helps your team win this year and potentially you can extend and create value for it going forward. I think you have to give yourself that flexibility to do that. So he's referring to, of course, in-season trades, but before that, he was also discussing, our budget is going to take into account a lot of after the draft, in the summer, when guys are cut, preseason, etc., kind of moves. And so while it's not like nothing new, we sort of expected this and profiled Ortiz as having this in his back pocket, given the background. It's nice to hear that he's going to go, look, we're short a few players. We need this, we need that. And as he said, like, Jim, what do you need? Do you need a linebacker? We'll get a linebacker. Need a tackle? We'll get a tackle. Like, it's just really refreshing, even if not a surprise to hear these kind of statements.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see patterns emerge from the way that Joe is operating and the way that he is speaking, and a lot of it is reflected in how the way that the Ravens have operated. I think you look at the way that the Ravens have always done free agency is like you have maybe a couple big signings if they can afford it, if not some like crucial needs for them, And we saw that with the Chargers this year, right? That they addressed right off the jump with blocking tight end, running back, safety. Like those are very clearly the top of the priority list, and they went out and addressed those. And that's kind of how the Ravens have done things for a while. They really don't, they're not big day one, day two free agency guys. It's, a little bit here or there. And then it's kind of like, all right, now the second wave, let's hit the second wave. Okay, now let's hit post draft. Okay, now let's hit August. And then let's do some things in the season. Like Calvin Oy was an in-season move for them. So the Ravens really always have been that like constant process of turning over the roster. And so far, we're seeing the start of that with Joe Ortiz. So I think it really is going to be a breath of fresh air. If anything happens in training camp, it's not just going to be like, okay, well, here's Foster Sarell. No, like the Ravens are going to go, or the Ravens, Joe Ortiz is going to go be aggressive and try and address that need. So it's coming together in that regard. We're starting to see the vision of how he operates. And like you mentioned, he's talked about flexibility of roster, of cap, like I think at every turn so far that he's had the chance to speak to the media.
Yeah, another thing you brought up as Kay brings up here, not necessarily about this particular corner, that being Christian Fulton, the cornerback who has met with them, but Joe Ortiz mentioned, we're talking to several corners, but this is a great class. And he said the same thing basically about the wide receiver group. Guys are going to get cut. This is a great class. This is a great depth of the class.
Yeah.
I will say there's probably no reason to read into any of this, but it did really feel like a general manager who was not in a rush to take either of these guys or either of these positions at any point. It felt like, and as he said as much, it's a deep wide receiver class. A lot of receivers. We're happy for Josh Palmer to step up. There's a lot of guys that could be cut. We're going to find guys later on. Didn't really feel like a guy who's like, yeah, we're going to take a receiver at 5. Now, again, why would he say that? He wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Right? He wants certain things to fall your way and keep things close to the vest. But it really felt like, especially with wide receiver, that they were going to be patient.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, it is lion season, but at the same time, the GMs have intention with everything that they say. Even Tom Telesco, who holds everything close to the chest, when he would say stuff, it was like, okay, like you got to read between the lines here and think about what exactly he's saying. Unless, of course, you're mounting Ossenforth, and then you're just like, hey, come get pick number 4 at every single other team in the league.
Yeah, I know. That was fun. So I have the sort of pull quote here from that general manager. There will be a big neon sign that says open. I don't like it blinking. It messes with my eyes, but we're always going to be listening. So, yeah. I guess I'll order my jersey now, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah,
it also could mean they want to swap with the Chargers too. It is possible the Chargers trade up, although I doubt it.
Theoretically possible, yes. It's going to be interesting. And Joe Ortiz was also asked about the idea of trading down, and he said that they're open to basically any strategy. So it's going to be a new experience for us because, at this time, usually in the Tom Telesco cycle, we're like, okay, the Chargers are taking that position in the first round. That's probably not the case going forward, and not to say that it's always just a thing of BPA, best player available. I do think that is definitely very relevant. But, Joe Ortiz really believes in just being flexible and keeping all options open. And I think that is definitely going to take some getting used to going forward for us.
Oh, yeah. The most we've seen is trade up into the first round for a linebacker, or trade up in the first round for a running back, or trade up in the second round for a linebacker, or trade up in the second round for a linebacker. God bless the Khalil Mack trade. That did a lot of work, obviously, and that was working just fine. But overall, it's mostly been let's trade up for linebacker or running back. I'm not saying that the Chargers wouldn't do that now, but I don't think we'd see that same thing happen in the first round. But regardless, heck, even if they did trade up for a running back in the second round or jump back into the first round, I still have faith in Ortiz and the Chargers and Harbaugh to then trade down in other spots or get comp picks, etc., to make up for what's lost. With the Chargers, let's just only give up picks to maybe get a player that maybe works out. Whereas with the Ravens and hopefully with Ortiz, there's so much flexibility. So yeah, the whole presser, again, nothing new, but I appreciate the flexibility. They're going to get exactly who they want.
Yeah, and I think it's like he is going to be very intentional in the players that he targets. I was messaging with a friend of mine who is a Ravens fan because we've seen the Chargers offensive line coach be very active this week at pro days. And so I was messaging back and forth with him like, hey, like, is there any pattern here of like the Ravens sending key position coaches to pro days and like them translating into becoming uh ultimately like Ravens selections? And he said yes and no. The vibe essentially was like certainly more than the Chargers have done in the past, because for the Chargers it was always like if you are targeting a first round player, they almost prefer to have like zero contact with that player. Like Joey and Derwin and Justin all have each said that they didn't really like speak with the Chargers a whole lot before the draft. So it is going to be funny to see how that kind of pans out. Offensive line coach B has been very busy this week. We'll see if that turns into them taking one in the first round or not.
Yeah, good Lord. I've never gotten more pushback than just saying JC Latham, right tackle.
I know.
Number 1. And everyone's like, oh, that's terrible. We should take Malik Neighbors. And I'm like, dude, I'm just ranking the guy. I know this right tackle 1. Like, I'm not even reading into this or anything. And everyone's like, take Neighbors or something or anything else but Latham. And I'm like, dude, I just like Latham as RT1. That's it.
You're like, I agree, but I like Latham.
Right.
Yeah.
I do have an RB1 in this class. Doesn't mean I want him at 5 either.
Yeah, 100%. Tyler, any other thoughts that you want to address from the media tour from Joe Ortiz today?
We can bring up the Keenan Allen thing, the idea that multiple offers were put on the table, but to me that it's tough to gauge. Like, okay, multiple offers is great, but like, Steven, I will buy your house for $1, $2, or $5. Do you accept? So no. I'm not saying that that's what they did to Keenan Allen, but like, what do those, what does those offers entail? What does it mean? What was the offer? So until we know more, I'll kind of wait and see.
Yeah, and an offer could mean a number of different things. And he pointed out too that like Daniel Popper mentioned that Joe was pressed a little bit. Like, did any of these scenarios include like just simply adding a void year? Like, what really happened? And basically, it sounds like they considered every option with every single member of the Big Four. Joe also mentioned that they received calls about each of the Big Four leading up to the combine. And then, they kind of just had to like figure out what the value was for these players. He also did point out that like the reason why they had to wait to make the moves that they did, restructuring Joey, trading Keenan, it was kind of to try and at least like tease the other teams, if you will, that they were going to try and keep those players. And that's how they were kind of able to create some leverage over the other teams. Because if they had rushed to make a trade before free agency started, maybe they're not able to really have that much of a market. They wouldn't have any leverage. So again, I appreciate the thoroughness of Joe Ortiz, even if I disagreed with the ultimate decision to trade Keenan Allen. I trust that he explored every single possible avenue with Keenan, with other teams, with the other three. And so regardless of what you think of the trade at this point in time, like Joe did every single thing possible to check the boxes, turn over the stones and do all that stuff.
Yeah. And I appreciate the honesty about leverage. We waited, we tried. I think a lot of us asked, why didn't you cut this person a week before the draft? Why weren't these moves made way sooner? Especially when some of them felt more obvious, but the Chargers were holding out as best they could to see if they could get anything for any of these players. At least that was worth the compensation that they could have gotten. So obviously keeping 2, trading 1, releasing 1. And that's that. So again, I appreciate the thoroughness, disagree with the move, but I get why they did it.
Yeah. Felt like a good way to like close the chapter, if you will.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So one of the things that Joe Ortiz will transition this year talked about today is Mr. Gus Edwards. He called him a bell cow running back. I don't know how much I buy that personally, which we can dive into. I went back and watched some Gus Edwards tape, some Baltimore Ravens run tape this past week. And so I'm curious to get your take here now that we've had some time to settle on things. Like, what exactly, or maybe not exactly, but like what's kind of your vision, Tyler, for Gus Edwards' role and like how much volume he might get? Do you buy him being a bell cow running back? Where are you kind of at with Gus? And then we'll try to transition to complimenting Gus later on in the conversation.
Right. No, that's a really good question, because bell cow, generally speaking, to me feels like 20 to 25 rushing attempts per game, a couple of passes, etc. Like, you are the feature guy. You're going to carry the ball the most. And generally with bell cow, it does seem like the bigger rushing attempt kind of guy, which is what Gus Edwards is. Like, and he said as much. Like, this is a big physical back. He's our goal line guy. He's our touchdowns guy. He's our bell cow. With that said, I am curious because historically, with Greg Roman, Gus Edwards has not been a guy who's touched the ball 20, 25 times a game. That's
Right.
generally not what he's done, just statistically looking at the carries. Now, right now, that kind of makes sense. I don't see them doing that. One, because Greg Roman didn't do it. And two, the Ravens have always had a platoon of running backs do this. It's
Right.
not going to be a one lead back kind of thing. At least for right now, it's going to be by committee ish. That doesn't mean that they can't take Benson in the second or third round or whatever they want to do and make him your RB1 eventually. But I don't think they need to find a good complement because I don't think Gus Edwards being the bell cow means 25 attempts per game and we're just going to run it 40 times a game. Like I really do think 20 feels like the max, especially with the contract. And you got to find someone else who can also run the football as well. I think a lot of, even in the chat, and I've just kind of thought about this, like, okay, like maybe the Chargers should get just like a receiving back because that's not what Gus Edwards is, and they should. But this receiving back also has to probably carry the ball another 10 times a game. So it can't just be a twitchy scat back sort of guy.
Yeah, if you look at just last year when Gus Edwards, becomes the RB1 from a touches standpoint, or at least from a carry standpoint, they still had Justice Hill and then also Keaton Mitchell. There's roles on this offense for running backs, basically. In terms of Gus Edwards, I think stylistically, like he fits exactly what oh my gosh, we got another huge super chat from Shallister. Really appreciate it. This always just blows me away. You all are great. Keep up the good work. Herbert with a run game would be so much fun. I agree. It should be a lot of fun to watch. And I had a lot of fun watching the Ravens rushing attack this week on film. So shout out to man. Appreciate you sincerely. That always catches me off guard.
Me as well. You want running back videos that bad, man? I will pump out some running back videos for you, dude. I will go through consensus board 1 to 500. No, seriously, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. That's again very, 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 very kind. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is pretty funny.
That is. I think he did the same thing last time too. So
he did.
Appreciate that. Yep. But yeah, just getting back to Gus Edwards here, I think he's not really a back that has had this, steady resume of being a workhorse back. Obviously, he was an undrafted free agent. He's, never really been a bell cow. So I think maybe there is some of that potential there. But I think even from his standpoint, like they're going to want to keep him fresh. They're going to want to be able to have a role for other backs in the offense. So he's going to be the RB1 in terms of rushing attempts. But to me, that's like 15 to 18 tops. Like I'm not really expecting more than that for him. I don't think he has the requisite juice to really be like a true every down back. And I think if you look at Harbaugh's history, unless he has Toby Gerhart or Frank Gore, there's always been like other backs, even with Blake Corum, who he loves and was, a top 5 Heisman candidate a couple of seasons ago. Donovan Edwards is right there. This year they had 3 backs who consistently touch the football. So this offense is going to really have a role for 3 backs if the Chargers want one. And Gus Edwards will be the leader of that room, but they need two other backs to be able to carve out roles.
Are you saying they need 2 other new backs, or you're hoping that one of Spiller or Dotson becomes?
I think 2 new backs. I really believed in Isaiah Spiller's potential, but I think I wish we would have seen more. Don't get me wrong, last season, but I think we've seen enough at this point.
I would tend to agree. I think his play will be elevated. Dotson will see how much he actually plays, but I'm good for either, or at least add 2 guys and may the best man win of the second guy you add.
Yeah. If he becomes better in this offense, and he is still only 22, which is crazy, awesome. I'm rooting for him. And Elijah Dotson, I think Dotson has an easier path to a role because I think his skill set fits that third running back more than Isaiah Spiller would. I think Isaiah Spiller is a tad redundant with Gus Edwards, at least as a runner, because I guess we can kind of transition to this. Like everything that I've watched from the Michigan offense, from the Baltimore Ravens offense over the past few months, they like to have a downhill back, somebody who's going to get you all the tough yards, do all the gap, all the power, That's going to be the guy that turns out the carries. And then they like to have these other guys who come in and attack the edges. The amount of counter concepts and jet sweep concepts that I watched from the Ravens offense this week actually kind of surprised me. I know it was different coordinators, but their rushing offense, it looked exactly the same as the Ravens offense. It looked exactly the same as previous Greg Roman offenses. So there was a lot of schematic overlap. So essentially what my vision is for this offense is you have your physical downhill big running back. You have a guy who can do a little bit of everything, but work on the edges. And then you have that third, like speed, pass catcher, screens, jet sweeps, that kind of role. And so right now, I think the Chargers have the one Gus Edwards, obviously, and then Elijah Dotson, I think, could do a little bit of the second and the third backs. But that's kind of what you're looking for, in my opinion, in terms of complementing Gus Edwards. Like I see the stock exchange guys brought up Braylon Allen. I know Jordan Reed has brought up Braylon Allen. That to me is too redundant. I think you need different skill sets than what you already have. Like maybe Braylon Allen is a better version of Gus Edwards, but he's like the identical archetype of Gus Edwards.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I've started to cluster running backs. It's not perfect, but like I have them by bruiser, home run, receiver, all around guys, and then more of like a slicer, twitchier kind of guy. And so if you're looking for a couple of the home run guys, like I'm thinking, and the chat said it, like Jalen Wright. At this point, the numbers was the first reason I even decided to watch him, and that was very evident in the 50-yard touchdowns he had this past season.
Yeah.
And then he goes out and runs the 4.39. Like to me, that's someone I think the home run outside kind of guy definitely pairs well. Isaac Guerendo, I actually think is overrated given the RAS, but perfectly suited for things outside and as a receiving option. And so I think if you're looking for someone to get more outside, run those counters, hit the home run, and just be not exactly the bruiser that Gus Edwards is, I think those two guys, one with the film and two with the RAS, I think those guys fit pretty well.
Yeah, I guess we can dive into those guys for sure. I wasn't a huge fan overall of Isaac Guerendo's film.
I agree.
Watching experience, it was very similar to like Izzy Abanikanda from Pittsburgh. And there's certainly value for that kind of player in the NFL. I mean, Raheem Mostert has played in the NFL for like 15 years at this point, and he's that same kind of player. So I think there is a role. You know, the Ravens did run a good amount of outside zone, and I think you have that player for that kind of role for Isaac Guerendo, and same thing with Jalen Wright. But I think also Jalen Wright has better film. Like I think Jalen Wright could be an all-around type player as well. And so Jalen Wright could be a pass catcher. He could be a work the edges. He could be a counter guy. I think there's just more vision, more explosiveness, more yards after catch or yards after contact potential with Jalen Wright. I was a big fan of his film. And then also the numbers are great. The testing is great. So Jalen Wright to me is in a tier very well above what I saw from Isaac Guerendo personally.
Yeah, I agree. Jalen Wright, let me see if exactly where I have him. I would take him as a second round grade. Guerendo is more like a fourth round grade for me. Two very different grades, but I feel like if you're looking for some guys later on, I think Guerendo would hit there. And I'm definitely not in the add a bruiser kind of guy. Some guys that I felt were more the bruiser type were like Audric Estime, Isaiah Davis, Blake Corum, Kendall Milton, Braylon Allen, like those guys. I'm fine if they take them. Don't get me wrong. If that's their vision, go for it. But if we're looking for a better complement, I don't know if those guys specifically are best to pair with Gus Edwards unless they want to double down at their at the current skill set.
Yeah, like it's funny. Like the Audric Estime stuff went from like, oh, he's awesome, he's slow, he's bad, and now like he ran like a 4.5 at his pro day, and now everybody likes him again. So there's definitely a lot of bruising backs in this class, and I think Estime is really good. I like him. I like Braylon Allen. I like Kendall Milton, Central Valley native here. Actually helped him get into Georgia. Fun fact. But this group of like all around backs, like I think this is where you probably are looking for the Chargers to attack because you can find pass catchers on day 3. Elijah Dotson, I think, could be a pass catcher as well. So in terms of the do-it-all backs, Tyler, is there a favorite of yours that you have so far?
Yeah, Benson. Trey Benson, absolutely for me. Benson and Brooks, and actually Ray Davis. I think those three guys are my favorite do-it-all backs. And to me, Benson and Brooks are RB1, RB2. And I wish one or both had been healthy the entire year, because they would be the consensus RB1, RB2 in this class based on the film. It's unfortunate. Maybe Brooks would be RB1, I don't know. But Benson actually went to the combine and crushed it. Brooks is obviously still recovering. So yeah, those two guys, and then Ray Davis. And here I go. My hot take is that Ray Davis is my RB3 right now, because I absolutely loved everything that he did. You watch him catch a pass, the contact, the vision, the creativity, the statistics. He's not like elite in every stat, but he's good enough in each one of them. To me, this isn't like a Rachaad White situation where I feel like where he has also had this elite RAS and was better statistically. But yeah, I have Ray Davis as RB3 after Benson and Brooks. I think he's such a complete back, and all the day 3 talk. I watched him. Basically, here's the experience for me. I take notes. I have pages and pages of typed notes for each player, each game, all 22. And Ray Davis is in like half of them are in all caps, because I'm just sitting there. I'm just sitting there doing like the meme and the GIF or whatever. I just had a blast watching Ray Davis.
Yeah,
I might change his ranking when I learn a bit more, see what some of the testing is, and consider the age. But from right now, like if it's not him, it's Jalen Wright. But Brooks, Davis, and Benson to me, the best all around. While I do acknowledge that I think Jalen Wright is a better runner than Ray Davis.
Yeah, so we come to this whole process late. Like, I don't know a whole lot about the background. I get a lot of like background information from like Dane Brugler's Beast, which comes out every single year, and you learn about like who these players are as people. And Ray Davis actually has a great story. I don't know if you read up on this, but Ray Davis was actually homeless in middle school and borderline into high school. And so the reason that he is an older prospect is because he was so behind academically due to his homeless status. And so he's a guy that probably would end up being at my school. We deal with a lot of former and current homeless students at my school.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ray Davis battled homelessness for a good part of his teenage years. And so he was late to the process, and that's why he got into college so late. And so he is an older prospect, but it's a different older than like a Blake Corum type. Like, he's older because he was dealing with like real life stuff, like real life stuff. And so the film is a ton of fun to watch. The pass catching ability really surprised me based off of like how he is talked about. And I tweeted a clip of this a couple weeks ago. There's a rep where they used him straight from the backfield, and he ran straight to the goal line, basically running a vertical seam route out of the backfield. There was a Texas route that I loved against Louisville. So he's got a lot of well-roundedness to his game. I think the like juice and athleticism is a little lacking, but I can totally understand why in this specific class, why somebody like him, who is super well-rounded and super consistent at everything, basically, would end up a top 5, top 3 back for you and for anyone else who has him that high.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look. I don't think it's exactly the same, but it feels like a Dameon Pierce situation for me, where like there were guys in that class who are faster, more explosive, better receivers, etc. But to me, like there's just enough boxes checked where it's like, I mean, Ray Davis will catch an angle route, he'll catch a fade, he'll run a wheel route, he'll catch a screen and break 3 tackles and tiptoe into the end zone, and then he'll run hard and so it's like after a while, just like there was so much good, it was hard to find a significant detractor to bring his grade down. So yeah, I think he's awesome.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I think that again, there's a lot of concerns with other prospects, but Trey Benson, the experience for me was definitely like not a lot of like broken tackles, a lot of tackles for loss, but that was because the Florida State offensive line was terrible. But then you really start to see him overcome that circumstance. So the Trey Benson film's a lot of fun. The athleticism showed up at the combine, obviously. My RB1 right now is Jonathan Brooks from Texas. I think he's another one that's just super consistent in a lot of different areas. And I think his ability as a receiver to me is in terms of like, so obviously they are better pass catchers, right? Like I think Blake Watson, I think is probably my favorite pass catcher. maybe Bucky Irving. There's a very clear like change of pace
Yes.
pass catcher role. But of like the pure runners, I would say Jonathan Brooks is the best pass catcher. And I think that shows up on tape several times over. And it really is unfortunate that he tore his ACL when he did, because he was really like rounding into form. There's really only one season of tread on his tire. So he's got a lot of fresh legs, if you will, being behind Bijan Robinson. But to me, just like the balance in the short term, the ability to make people miss in the hole, the ability to break you over the top because of the speed. Jonathan Brooks is my favorite watch of this class. And I think that there's a lot to like there. He's still very young, still not a ton of tread on the tire. So Brooks was my favorite watch. The top of this running back class, I think, became better and more fun to watch the more that I continued to dive in a different way than obviously last year where you had Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. There's not that guy, but there's just a lot of like quality second round, third round backs this year.
Yeah, I agree. Brooks was a fun watch, and much like Bijan and Roschon Johnson the previous year, there's a lot of two-back stuff going on with Texas, and they had him run block several times for the other back in the backfield. Is it just like stuff like that is great to see? As you mentioned, as a receiving back, great. I watched it and was like, this is perfect. You know, you don't have to be a receiving back, but you got to be able to be a dual threat guy. And that's where I felt Benson and Brooks and these guys really fell. The only reason I have Benson higher, outside of the fact that he went to the combine and crushed it and is in theory healthier and should be healthier, is the fact that I think he has that, you know, what do you do these draft things for every year? Hopefully to try to learn something and to take something moving forward. To me, Breece Hall is my RB1B back in 2 years ago. The reason Breece Hall was so good to me is because his line sucked. And nobody, I thought, has been better. No, I don't think anyone has been better, in my opinion, at dealing with crap in front of him every single time he touched the ball at Iowa State.
Yeah.
Where at Benson, I almost feel it's very similar. And I think that that trait just stands out for me. Like, okay, because like the NFL is so dependent on the rushing attack is dependent on the blocking for the most part. And it's great. Like you can watch some of these guys and the numbers look great. Woohoo, everything's blocked. And he breaks through the hole and scores a touchdown. Like that's great. When it sucks, who are you? And I think that Benson is someone who's like, it kind of was bad a lot of the time. And very good competition in front of him. And yet he managed to overcome. Sometimes a 1 yard gain needs more than a 50-yard gain for some of these guys because he fought and made 3 guys miss just to get that 1 yard. That's so important to me. And I think Breece Hall's obviously shown out very well. So Benson, I'm not saying they're the same prospect by any means, but I like that Breece Hall gene, being able to just deal with bull crap in front of you. So yeah, Benson Brooks, very good.
Yeah, that's very well said about Benson. I think there were so many runs where like he would force 3 missed tackles, but it's like a 4-yard gain just because the line was that bad. And it's fun to watch those. You have to like get through like, oh my gosh, this line is just terrible. You have to get through like a game of just constant 4-yard gains, but then you really gain appreciation for like how he's getting those 4 yards. And so getting him into this kind of scheme that the Chargers are going to run, I think will be perfect. I would think it'd be a great complement to what they have in Gus Edwards. He can do a lot of the work the edges stuff, and he can also do a lot of the downhill RB1 stuff. So it's a good class to find a complement to Gus Edwards on day 2. Let's get to the day 3 guys here, and then I think we do need to touch on the Blake Corum conversation a bit here. But in terms of day 3, Tyler, like I think, you know, we're kind of talking about guys that we feel could go day 2 or should go day 2. But do you have a favorite like guy that you're like 4th round, 5th round? That's your guy of choice.
Yeah. Okay. So it slightly depends because I feel like I like some of these guys who are projected to go maybe round 4 more so, but the guys that feel like firmly on day 3, it feels like 2 of the pass catcher types. Like I have them in this group. That'd be Will Shipley and from Clemson, Blake Watson from Memphis. Both of those guys fit a more, you know, pass catcher type. Really liked watching them. So I think if you're looking for that kind of compliment, Shipley, Watson are great there. If you want to go that bruiser type, like I do think Isaiah Davis from South Dakota State absolutely fits. Bigger guy at the Senior Bowl. He was bigger than everyone in every statistical category, just height, weight, hands, arm length, etc. So that guy, and I think a bit of a better home run threat than the bruiser category makes him out to be, but that feels like that kind of guy. Haven't gotten a ton into the rest of it. Oh, Dylan Lobb as well. You, I think, mentioned the Danny Woodhead thing. I don't remember who gave him that initial comp, but I actually see that. Like usually I don't really care for
Yeah,
comps that much, but I genuinely saw it with him. So him, Shipley, Watson as receiving backs, totally. Some people could say like Lloyd or Irving as fourth round ish guys. I don't know if they're going to go there. Maybe Irving after the testing. So I'm not really going to consider them. So if I'm looking for like maybe like round 5, 6, 7 kind of guys,
sure.
Davis, Lobb, Shipley. I really liked all these guys.
Yeah, the Marshawn Lloyd conversation, I think he's worked his way into day 2 conversations. At least should be looked upon that way. He could be there in the 4th round, and I would love that. I think that'd be a great fit as well. Bucky Irving, man, it's so unfortunate that he tested the way he did because the film is great, the numbers are great, but he's just gonna fall because of the sheer athleticism. Like this is a position that is becoming more and more reliant on that athleticism and on the juice, on the explosiveness. And Bucky is quick. He's able to break in and out of his cuts super, super quickly. He's not afraid to get a little grimy. He's not afraid to do the dirty work. So if Bucky Irving is a choice, I would be pretty happy about it. But I understand like why somebody would pass on him given the lack of speed. Of the pure like pass catchers, I mentioned earlier, you mentioned him. Blake Watson is my favorite one. I think Memphis definitely has a type at running back, and that type is so fun to watch run routes and be able to work out of the backfield. And of anybody who could be like the Keaton Mitchell of this offense, like I think Blake Watson is that choice. I think Will Shipley, there's a lot to like there. I think Lobb from the small school
New
Hampshire. Yeah. There's a lot to like there in terms of just the route running ability, but I think this offense would prioritize like a truly explosive scat back. And I think that's Blake Watson more than it is the other guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree there. I love Blake Watson. I don't know what it is. I don't know what they're feeding them at Memphis, but there's always somebody who's kind of undersized who kicks ass and is really twitchy there. I remember going through like the draft picks from Memphis recently. I'll have to pull it up, but it's like D'Angelo Williams way back in the day, obviously. Technically, Gostkowski also counts. We're not going to count Paxton Lynch. We're not going to slander their name with that. But Tony Pollard, Antonio Gibson, Kenneth Gainwell, Calvin Austin, these are all guys that kind of fit a certain prototype, and they all carve out roles in the NFL.
Yeah, it's a fun group to watch for sure. I would be a fan of Blake Watson. I think it is going to be interesting to see what specific archetype they target. Darrell Henderson, that was another good one from Kevin Kernick for sure, from Memphis. Because they could still go get another running back in free agency if they wanted to, or they could wait and do the draft and then handle free agency later on. So I think the Chargers have options at any point. If they want to do it all guy in the round 3, you take that one. If they want one in round 4, I think you can take one. If you want a pass catcher late day 3, I think there's lots of high quality options there for sure. All right, before we wrap up today's show, do have to talk about our friends over at Prize Picks. It's been great working with them. Hopefully you guys are taking advantage of the code, taking advantage of the opportunity to win yourselves some money this week during March Madness and the rest of the tournament. So you can go to the link prizepicks.com/guilty and use the code guilty at checkout for a deposit match up to $100 over at Prize Picks. Again, prizepicks.com. It's a great resource. Use a lot of their stuff lately for NBA picks as well. It's super easy to use, a lot of fun to use, and highly recommend using Prize Picks.
Yeah, total blast. I've been jumping into the NBA. I haven't watched a single game, but you know what? That makes it better for me because I just I don't have my heart and EPA per play. I don't know what's going on. But as long as Caitlin Clark puts up 1 point, which I'm assuming is going to happen, no problem, knock on wood, then
probably the first minute.
Yeah, then I'll get $50 out of this. So I'm pumped. I know she's not NBA. I'm sorry. I've been going with NBA, but they had a great special for her at 0.5 points. I did take the more, believe it or not. And so as long as she scores 1 point, I got $50 out of it. So pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good choice. Caitlin Clark's amazing. So, okay, let's have the Blake Corum conversation. I rewatched a couple of his regular season games while watching the other teammates, and then I watched the playoff games again from this past season against Alabama and Washington, respectively. But where are you at with him now? I've kind of softened a little bit. I think the RB1 talk of like film Twitter is ridiculous to me. Has your stance softened at all?
Yes, but not a ton. So watching him after you watch enough freaking Michigan games, you start to like memorize plays.
Yeah.
Like when the
There's
Samuel
so many
hit is gonna
players to
happen.
watch.
Yeah, like that you start memorizing plays, right? I did have a certain respect for some of the work he did against very tough competition after contact, pushing for the goal line, being elusive, finding the end zone, that sort of thing. So I think his grade could increase for me, and it probably will increase for me. But otherwise, no, not really. I mean, I get the allure of Blake Corum. I do. It's very difficult to argue that touchdowns are bad and that 27 touchdowns is not impressive. But to me, I mean, it's honestly, first it was the statistics. The age doesn't bother me as much. He's like 20th percentile or worse in basically every notable category. It is very hard for me to pitch to anyone that is a good prospect just based on statistics. Okay, but that's just numbers. I can be fooled by numbers. Things can happen. Although running backs, I feel like there's a strong correlation. Then you go to who he is, the injury, the age, and guys, I don't know if you've ever met me at practice before, but I am taller than him. I don't know if you met me at practice before, but as the resident Asian of the podcast, well, I guess I can't say that anymore. As the resident Chinese guy of the podcast, I am not very big. So that just kind of plays into it. So the statistics are not very good. There's an injury at play. There's an age thing here. And he is smaller than me, which doesn't mean he's a bad back and that I'm better. I'm not saying that. It's just another thing. And he also ran a 4.5 something at the combine. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it wasn't exactly a home run hitter either. So it's very hard for me to take someone who was awful statistically, has an injury history, is not a speed like Benson crushed it. If he had a Trey Benson kind of day, okay, maybe he's returning to form. But with all the detractors, it's very hard for me to place him any higher than a day 3 kind of guy. With that said, I do want to do some justice here and go back and just grade him as a separate prospect based on the previous year, because I do want to see what he was and what Jim Harbaugh may be thinking with time, with training, with recovery, he could get back to being. So as of right now, day 3 guy, I think the top 3 running back stuff is impossible to actually argue, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm obviously not a huge fan.
I think, like I said, I've softened a little bit here. I think you watch the 2 playoff games and you do see a little bit more juice and explosiveness than during the regular season. And maybe that is just some further time away from the injury. But at the same time, like the lack of ability after contact was still there. And like some of that is just his style and his size and things like that. But the way that Michigan used him was as a Gus Edwards type, like as a physical downhill back. And that's probably not his game. I think you probably would like to see him more in an outside zone kind of scheme where he has time and space in between the tacklers and be able to use his vision. Because I do really like his vision. He does have an innate ability to figure out how to go through the scrum and be able to figure out these little spaces and windows where he can wiggle through and jump cut. He does have a nice jump cut, but it's just not a running back style that I usually gravitate towards. There's not a lot of after the contact juice. There's not a lot of creativity in terms of breaking tackles. And then like you mentioned, all the other stuff just outside of who he is as on the field player. It's hard for me to wrap my arms around him. I do have him graded higher. I think I have him graded higher than anybody on the podcast or associated with the podcast, but it's still a day 3 grade for me. I would be okay with them taking him in the 4th round. That's where it starts for me. I think like every time I hear national media members talk about him, they're like, oh, the Chargers are going to take him in the 2nd round. Hard pass at 37. Like there are so many other directions I would like to see the Chargers go. So he is a good football player. I am not anti Blake Corum. I'm anti Blake Corum on day 2. I think he is firmly a 4th round, 5th round conversation for me. And I could see a lot to like there. But it's the draft stock more than the player for me, because I see a lot of draft analysts who have him as RB1 or RB3. And like, I can't get there. Like, you're for RB1, RB3, you're looking for the whole profile, right? And
Yeah.
like, that's what you see with a Trey Benson. That's what you get with a Jonathan Brooks outside of the injury stuff. But everything else checks those boxes. And it's just the Blake Corum stuff. It's hard for me to like really wrap my head around on day 2.
Yeah, I agree. There's not really a ton of avenues to just really push him ahead of so many other guys.
Yeah.
You know, Jalen Wright, maybe not a great receiving threat. Maybe some detractors here and there, certain things, but like, okay, he's like 2nd in the class in yards after contact, 1st in breakaway rate, 1st in yards per attempt, and his RAS was awesome. So it's like, okay, yeah, I can put him in the top 5 because those things check out. With Corum, it's like, I don't know if he scored 1 touchdown if he scored 10 touchdowns this year, what are we talking him? How is the media talking about him? And obviously, if Jim Harbaugh wasn't the coach of the Chargers, would they even consider him in the 2nd round, according to national media? No, they wouldn't. So it would be it's a very incredibly tough sell. And frankly, like, I don't need to find out. I'd rather just take someone who doesn't have the injury history, who might be younger, who is more explosive, etc. There's a role for him. I totally get why he could fit on a team. I could get why he could fit on the Chargers too. But there's so many other options I'd prefer.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. 4th round, I'm about it. Day 2, not even considering that, to be honest with you. And that's the tough part about like draft conversations, right? Is like you have to evaluate the player, right? And then you also have to evaluate the draft stock of like, where does the national media, where does the consensus board see this player? And if you're not on the same page, it's like, oh, you're anti this player. It's like, that's not really the case. I don't see it that same way. So there are definitely other players I like. He is my RB10 right now, which weirdly enough was exactly where Isaiah Spiller was. So take that for what it's worth, I guess. But I just think that he fits the offense. I think that he's probably better suited as an RB2. A lot of people are talking about him as like an RB1 type, and I just can't get there.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough one. So happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah. All right, Tyler. Any other final thoughts on the running back class?
It's better than people are giving it credit for. I really do think it is not a round 1 group. It's probably not really a round 2 group, although a couple of guys should go. But 3 to 7, honestly, I really like this class. I think it's actually a lot stronger than I thought it was. I think the tight end class does not hold up for me as well. I think the linebacker class has not been a favorite of mine. I genuinely think the running back class has grown on me the more I've watched them.
Yeah, 100%. I think for round 3, round 4 running backs, this is a great class. I think the depth of this class could be really fantastic, and you can find different roles for a lot of different guys. So yeah, I tend to agree. I think this class has stood out better than what I've seen. I think Dane Brugler has pointed this out. There's not a top 50 back, but there's like 8 guys that could go in the top, 50 to 75. Like it's that kind of class, which for the Chargers, that's great because they couldn't take an RB1 in the 1st round or 2nd round, even if they wanted. Well, I guess they theoretically could, but they shouldn't take an RB in the first 2 rounds. They should definitely take one in the 3rd or 4th. And I'm excited to see how that pans out.
Give me your RBs 1 through 5.
My RB1 is Jonathan Brooks. My RB2 is Trey Benson. My RB3 is Marshawn Lloyd. My RB4 is Bucky Irving. I cannot quit him. I understand why people have him lower, but the film is so good. The data is so good. So he's RB4 for me. And then Braylon Allen from Wisconsin is my RB5.
Okay. I have not watched Braylon Allen. I was trying to get to more of the day 3 or later guys, so I have not watched him. So unfortunately, I don't have him in the rankings. I'm Benson, Brooks, Davis, Wright, and Lloyd, with Irving just almost making it. Maybe even would have made it, but the testing bumped him out.
Yeah, I understand. I get it. It's so hard for me to watch him and not love him, though. Like, it's just, He checks every box except for the
I mostly
testing.
don't even care, honestly, about the testing. It just moved
Yeah.
him like one down.
Yeah. He was like, you grade these players, right? But the testing definitely matters. Like heading into the combine, he was RB2 for me. And it was just like, it just, see how Trey Benson tests and you see how Bucky tests, and it breaks that tie, and so Bucky moved down a couple spots.
Yes. For everyone asking if Blake Corum can be a fullback, I don't know, but I don't think he'll be the next Lorenzo Neal. I mean, listen, the not the Patriots, the Ravens took a defensive tackle in Ricard and made him a fullback.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Hey, in Harbaugh we trust, I guess.
Speaking of Patrick Ricard, I was watching the Ravens tape against the Lions from this past season, and they had Patrick Ricard run a corner route out of kind of like an H-back alignment. It was the slowest corner route that became a target I think I have ever seen in my entire life. The defense did not even guard him. They did not think he was going to touch the ball. So he was just like chilling wide open. It was really funny to watch. But speaking of fullbacks, I've been messaging with our guy, Thomas Martinez. I don't know if he's in the chat right now. Shout out Thomas Martinez, does great stuff. He's Bolts Draft Talk on Twitter. The Texas A&M fullback apparently is the leader in the clubhouse. So if you like fullback tape, I guess we should be watching Texas A&M.
Okay, sounds good. Or we go with like Matlock and McFadden and see if we can do that again.
Yeah, Jordan McFadden as a fullback, I think would be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right, some super chats in here before we wrap up. Charlie Sinclair, he says, I think the MHJ, Marvin Harrison Jr. dream is alive, boys. We talked about the Cardinals GM saying, Neon Line, come get this pick. It certainly seems like a reality. There's still a very large part of my brain that doubts that JJ McCarthy is actually a quarterback who a team will trade up into the top 4 and take. But we'll see how it comes. We'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a 5% chance of it happening, but I'll take it. I'll take 5%.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I'm saying there's a chance.
Nature's Calls podcast, JC Latham at 5. Obviously, I'm joking. At 11, I'm about it. At 5, not so much.
Yeah, 5. No, thank you. Not that he's terrible by any means. I do like him, but 5, I'm okay.
Yeah. Brandon Thorne's comparison for JC Latham was Anthony Davis, who was the 49ers right tackle when Jim Harbaugh was the head coach there, for what it's worth.
Okay, interesting.
If you're not subscribed to Brandon Thorne's Substack, by the way, I highly recommend. He does awesome work, and he's the best in the business regarding offensive line takes on social media. Last one here from Sebastian Oriana. If Jonathan Brooks and Jackson Powers Johnson are somehow available at 37, who would you guys pick?
Let's say it on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah, okay, very good. We were totally synced on that one. Good job.
Yeah, super
internet high five. All right.
Fireworks, maybe? Yeah, Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah, how about that? What does that bring up for you?
I love it. Jackson Powers Johnson rocks, man. He's so much fun to watch. I forget who it was. I think it might have been Theo Ash. He said that his hot take of the draft is that Jackson Powers Johnson will be the best center, like right away.
In the NFL?
In the NFL. I mean, Kelsey retired. Corey Lindsey retired.
I mean, Creed. If unless Creed keeps throwing it in the dirt.
I was gonna say, a lot of Chiefs fans actually do not like Creed anymore.
Yeah, well, they didn't like Andy Reid last year halfway through the season either. So I would love to complain about my 3rd championship and how much I don't like Andy Reid. Like, bad play calling from Andy Reid this week. Gee golly. Our 3rd Super Bowl.
No, they went after Brett Veach like extremely hard during the season too. I'm like, what are you guys complaining about?
You got to trust the process at some point. Like, Chiefs just get into the postseason, turn it on, kill everybody, and call it a day. Like, it's just every year at this point, and it's a great receiver class. I'm so unhappy. They're gonna take somebody at 32, and
I think the Chiefs are gonna trade up. Because they need receiver and they need offensive tackle. And I just don't. I don't know. Like, people keep on saying like, like Ladd McConkey at 32. Like, I think the Chiefs are going to be aggressive in the draft and try and go get an Amarius Mims, a Tyler Guyton, a AD Mitchell. Like, I think they're going to trade up in the draft just based off of like how I'm hearing about their needs and stuff like that. I don't think they'll stick and pick Xavier Worthy or Lad McConkey or Kingsley Sumatia. Like, I think they're going to be aggressive.
Great.
So that's fun.
Yeah, that's neat. Oh, hey, Mom.
All right, guys, that's gonna do it for us today. Excuse me, voice is a little shot after talking all day. Let us know who your 5 top running backs in this class are and who your potential favorite Charger is. Should be a lot of fun to have this kind of conversation. We'll be sure to interact with you guys on YouTube. This is obviously our last episode of the week, so next week we'll be back on our normal schedule over on the Chargers channel on Tuesday and Thursday. No live Q&A this Saturday, but those will happen from time to time as we get closer to the draft. I think we are officially 5 weeks away from today. So coming down the home stretch here, we'll be sure to have you guys covered with a ton of different draft content as we get closer and closer. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Appreciate you guys as always. Bolt up.